This is Upside Down in the Middle of Nowhere, chapters 47, 48, and 49. This is the end of section 5 at the end of this video. The caved in look of Mama's face all but did me in, and I crumbled into a ball of mush, hugging my knees so fast I ain't even sure how I got there. And Mama slid to the floor and gathered me into her. Celia squeezed herself up in, and we sat like that for a good long while, rocking and swaying back and forth. And Miss Priscilla helped Kayla out of the crib so she'd get in that big sobbing mother-daughter happy pile too. And I ain't no doctor, but I swear Kayla looked better just from seeing Mama's face and getting washed in kisses. To be in Mama's arms again felt right, and it was like Christmas and my birthday all at once, and I ain't sure how she held us at all at the same time, but like that, but she did, and we could have stayed there like that, like we was one person instead of four for the rest of time, and it would have been fine with me. I knew you would want to find us, Mama. I just knew it, Celie said from up inside our Mama hug, and it wasn't until right then that I realized I'd been thinking I might not have ever seen Mama again. I looked up from under all of Mama's loving, and Miss Priscilla was beaming from ear to ear with tears streaming down her face, and Matthew went to Martha and put his arm around her shoulders, and she reached up and patted the top of his hand, and Matthew's eyes filled with happiness, and he nodded at me. And the feeling coming from him drifted across that itty-bitty space and found my heart, and a mix of laughs and cries filled the air. Mama stood up on wobbly legs with Kayla clinging to her, and she grabbed a hold of the matching metal crib holding Colleen. I helped Mama steady herself while she adjusted to the sight of finding her lost children. Kayla, what's happened to Kayla? Mama's words were shaky as her legs. She's sick, I said. Celie flew into a long story about how Kayla had the runs and wasn't eating right, and I didn't mind her doing that on account of me and my stupid clumsy feet that were. Sorry, I didn't mind her doing the explaining how How was I supposed to tell Mama that it was on account of me and my stupid clumsy feet? Her sweet baby girl was sick from stucking in putrid water that I dumped her into. Mama put Kayla into Colleen's bed, and the two of them slipped into twin talk and giggles, and I leaned over the rail and kissed my baby brother on his cheek and untangled the twisted oxygen tube from around his ankle, and I warned them both not to be yanking on each other's tubes. Well, for goodness sakes, will y'all look at that? And Miss Priscilla said, soaking up the sight of my twin brother and sister loving on each other. I don't think I've ever seen a sweeter sight in all my days. And she pulled an old wad of tissue from her pocket and found a spot to wipe under her nose. And for the first time, Mama took in the sight of the freckled man rocking away with a lopsided grin. This is our friend, Mama, I said. His name is Mr. High Pockets. And he stood up fast, almost knocking over the wooden chair, and he swooped his arm, inviting Mama to please take his comfortable seat. He has nice eyes, doesn't he, Mama? Celie giggled, and Mama and Mr. High Pockets nodded at each other, and Mama barely got out a hello before Celie took off rambling again. The girl was wide open. It was easy to see that Mama and Miss Priscilla had a secret understanding and a liking for one another, and the two of them close together like that made me realize how much Mama could use some of Miss Priscilla's mothering. A tear from Mima rolled down my cheek, and a wish that she was still there sharing in our celebration of finding each other. Kayla and Colleen were lost in being with each other, and Celie was talking a mile a minute, not even pausing between words to take a breath. And a soldier girl named Stella made us get on a bus, and she knows Uncle T-Bone from the army, and the little wannabe room was as noisy as the French Quarter in February, and I was more happy right then than I'd been since the day I made 10. And I looked over and seen Matthew slowly inching his way out of the room with his family out in front of him. Wait, I said. And they stopped, and Mama turned and looked at me. It's cool. I'm happy you found Mama, but we best be getting back to the cots. Mama, this is my friend Matthew, I said, never taking my eyes off him, and I took a hold of the stubborn boy's hand and pulled him over by Mama. It's nice meeting you, Miss Curtis, Matthew said. Here's my sister Martha, and my brothers Lukey and Little John. Mama looked past the boy and straight into Miss Priscilla. No, family, the woman whispered to Mama. Watermelon red filled Matthew's cheeks, and Mama held out her arms. Matthew stepped closer to her, and she pulled him in and squeezed good and tight, planting a long kiss on the top of his thick blonde head, and she let him loose and wiped a tear from his cheek with the back of his hand. Mama studied him, and sad and happy showing up at the same time on her pretty face. You remind me of Georgie. She looked over at the other three Bowman kids with sad love pouring from her eyes, and Martha wandered over and let Mama hug her too. Lukey and Little John stayed smushed up against Miss Priscilla. Look, Mama, remember this? Celie broke the awkward quiet spell that had laid itself down over the room, and her book sack fell into the floor when she pulled out the swelled up Bible that she fished out of the floodwaters. I've been reading to Mr. High Pockets every day. Now we can take turns reading to him like we did for Mima, right, Mama? And Celie scooched up on the Mama's lap the best she could, and and being too big for laps and all. But when Mima sat with her Bible, she said she could draw strength from knowing that the word God was resting in her lap. Remember, Mama? Celia took a big breath, and I don't think the girl was in control of her own mouth right then. Well, I mumbled, I never heard Mima say nothing about God sitting in her lap. Not God, silly, the word of God. She said it a lot. I'm sure she did. And Mama said in a far off voice, I'm not sure what your Mima enjoyed more, sitting on top of that old porch swing with you, Armani, or listening to you read. Celia, Mama sniffed. A blanket of quiet fell over us. I like to read to Lukey and Little John, Martha piped up. Shh, not now, Miss Priscilla said, and patted the side of the girl's leg. This is 48. It turned out to be the kind of morning that would have made Meemaw linger in the kitchen till way past breakfast time. When I closed my eyes, I could almost smell Mama's pies baking in the oven and a warm chicory brewing in the coffee pot. And we spent most of the day loving on Mama and Mama loving on us, all of us, and it was clear as blue in Matthew's eyes that Mama had already made space up in her heart for the Bowman kids, and I sat cross-legged on the floor watching my Mama spread her goodness to every single soul in that cramped room. Miss Priscilla surprised us all when she came in gliding in sometime afternoon with a huge bag full of cheeseburgers and fries from McDonald's, and I ain't lying when I said it was the best burger I've ever had in my whole life. Miss Priscilla even brought shakes for Mr. High Pockets and the twins. There we were, 11 of us gathered wherever we could squeeze around the beds, eating juicy cheeseburgers and gulping down Cokes on ice, and the room was filled with mms and thank yous, but I couldn't help but feel the empty space for Daddy and Georgie not being there, growing bigger by the minute as the day wore on. Celia and Martha sat together on the floor up against Mama's legs, and the two of them chomped on fries, happy bobbing their knobby knees and heads, and not one time did Mama say a word about all the smacking going on or the talking with their mouths full. Matthew and his brothers ate in a huddle watching Mr. High Pockets put on a magic show, and the man kept making loud slurping sounds even long after it was obvious his shake was gone. It might have been the only one who noticed Miss Priscilla grinning from here to Mississippi, and like then, she couldn't hold on no more. She blurted out, "It's settled, y'all." "What is, Miss P?" and Matthew asked, handing a quarter back to Mr. High Pockets. The boy had been trying forever to figure out how to get that shiny coin to fall out of his nostril, and I ain't trying to be hurtful, but you could pay me $1 million to touch that nasty quarter. You couldn't pay me $1 million to touch that nasty quarter, especially if I was eating at the same time. Okay, listen up. Here's what we're gonna do. And she looked at each one of us, and her eyes settled on me. We're gonna shift the furniture around here so y'all can stay with your mama tonight. That is, of course, if y'all want to. She winked. And the Bowman children, Mama asked. I know I could squeeze everyone in, and we all stared at Miss Priscilla. Y'all are so silly sometimes, I swear, and she smacked a time or two. When I said y'all, I meant all of y'all. It's going to be a tight squeeze, but if the twins don't mind sharing, and you sure don't seem like they do, we'll get rid of this other crib and bring in a rollaway, and y'all can decide who sleeps where. And Mama let out a big sigh and whispered, "Thank you, Jesus." Matthew swiped at his eyes with the back of his hand and a real quick look somewhere else, pretending I didn't see him do it. "Now," Miss Priscilla said, "first thing in the morning, I mean early, y'all, most likely even before the first breakfast call, they're going to move Kayla and Colleen to the pediatric unit over at Baton Rouge General. It's a good hospital with fine doctors." "But how?" Mama asked. "All the arrangements have been made, Miss Curtis. Your babies are going to get the care they need, and you have my word on it." Mama closed her eyes tight, and tears came streaming down. "Well, now look at what you've gone and done," Miss Priscilla said in a shaky voice, and she cleared her throat and reached into her pocket, pulling out a tissue. "Now you got me crying, and my face is going to run right off. And trust me now, you don't want to see me without my face on." Mama's smile shined through her tears, and Miss Priscilla, you're a beautiful person with or without your face. And now I see why your children are so special. And Lukey was stretching out the bottom of Matthew's t-shirt, making sure it was clear that he needed to use the bathroom. "The hospital's setting up a private room for y'all, Miss Curtis. Please call me Catherine," she said. Miss Priscilla took a long breath and looked at Mama with the look of someone fixing to ask for a favor. "Catherine, would you be willing to take temporary guardianship over the Bowman children?" Mama didn't take half a second to say, "Yo, yes, whatever I can do to help." Matthew looked at Mama like he was laying eyes on an angel. Miss Priscilla snuck a peek over at Mr. High Pockets, who had his eyes closed, and she lowered her voice to where I could barely hear her. "The hospital's agreed to make an exception and bring in a bed for Mr. High Pocket, since it appears he's adopted y'all, but that's up to you, Catherine." And I glanced over at pretend sleeping Mr. High Pockets, and the man had the tiniest smile on the corner of his mouth, and I covered my own smile with my hand and waited to see what Mom was going to say. Of course he could stay with us, and Mama stood and reached out her hands to Miss Priscilla. "I don't know how to thank you." Just then, a bald, busy nurse squeezed her oversized self into the room, and we all squished backwards as far as we could, trying to make room for the nurse and her overflowing backside, big and shiny white head, so she could get up close to her patients. The woman filled the room the same way Miss Lowell filled the donut shop. Good afternoon, she said to nobody, and right away she went to fussing with the tank, the pumped oxygen to the tube going up my brother's nose. Do we have to go? Do we have to go, TT? I do, said Lukey. Everyone in the room looked at the boy, who hadn't said one word since his foster mama had got crushed, and everyone except the nurse. Pardon? She asked, still not looking at anyone. Oh, it's nothing, I said, putting my arm around the little boy's shoulder. Lukey, here just needs to use the bathroom. And she finally looked up like she was noticing the room full of us for the first time. Are you a family? She asked. And Matthew came and stood beside me. Yes, he stood beside me. Yes, ma'am, we're a family. And the nurse locked eyes with Mr. High Pockets, and he smiled with his twinkly copper-colored eyes and gave me a thumbs up. The nurse looked at me and Matthew, then around the room at each one of us. And I'm sorry for interrupting, but I need to check vitals. You do whatever you need to do, sugar, Miss Priscilla said, and she fiddled with Kayla's IV bag. She reached up under my sister's head and pulled out her little pillow. She held Kayla's head carefully with one hand and gave the pillow a couple good shakes with the other. Quicker than Daddy could give a raspberry, the nurse had fluffed her pillow back under her patient's head, and after fooling my sister, she checked Colleen's temperature. I liked the way she tickled his belly before she did her exam. I spotted a name tag, Biddy Pinkerton, RN, and I wondered if her mama had known her daughter was going to throw such a large size when she chose the name Biddy. After the nurse named Biddy finally finished doing all of her nurse stuff, she stood in the center of our room and slowly turned herself into a circle, pointing at each one of us and counted. 1, 2, 3, and by the time she got to 8, she was saying the numbers like it was 108 instead of just 8. 11, she said, like she wouldn't have believed it if she hadn't seen us with her own two eyes. My heart sank, and I just knew the woman with the big bald head was fixing to tell us we were going to have to go back to our cots in the corner, and I was already feeling the burn in my eyes coming on, and the woman hadn't even spoke yet, and I inched my way closer to Mama. Y'all are blessed, she said, still shuffling herself around in a circle, looking at the bunch of us. There are folks up here that have lost more than half their families. There's some, she got choked up on the words, water pooled in her eyes, lost everything. I haven't even heard from my own people, some in New Orleans and my daddy's people who stay in Bogalusa. The nurse buried her face in her hands, but couldn't stifle the cry that came from her. And it took a couple of steps towards Miss Nurse Biddy, and I wrapped my arms the best I could around the middle of the lady and shushed her in her ear. It's okay. It's going to get better. The nurse placed one of her wet hands over the top of mine, and I know you're right. I know what you are. And the lady blew her nose softly, and she stood up straight and cleared her throat. Like I was saying, y'all are blessed. Don't you forget that. And no one said nothing. And the best get back to work, she said with a soft smile. And Miss Nurse Biddy looked at me with wetness still under her eyes and said, let me know if you need anything, you hear? Yes, ma'am, I said, and I never saw Nurse Biddy Pinkerton RN or her beautiful bald head again. Miss Priscilla blew kisses in the air for all of us, and she said she needed to be good. We needed to be good and keep the noise down so the sick folk could get the rest. And I'll talk to you, Miss P, Matthew said. I need to take Lukey to the bathroom and check and see if we have anything left on the cots. Well, I sure would enjoy the company. Miss Priscilla stopped and turned face to us like he was just remembering something, and her mouth opened, then closed, and opened again. Oh, never mind. Don't mind me. I best be going. And she turned and started walking away to give us a little wave over her shoulder. Matthew looked at me and shrugged, but after about 2 steps, Miss Priscilla whipped herself around and said, well, I'm just going to come out with it. Chapter 49. Every single one of us stared at Miss Priscilla, waiting to hear what she was going to say. What is it, Miss Priscilla? Mama asked. Well, she said, and I sat down in a folding chair. Shortly after y'all got transported in the morning to the hospital, I'll be leaving myself. I think every single one of us let out a gasp. What are you talking about, Miss P? Matthew said. Celia's eyes went all big and looked over at me, shaking her head. The authorities have opened up a spillway bridge to people with special clearance, and she was talking to the floor. And I don't know about Matthew and the rest of them, but me and Mama looked at each other because we knew the road home to New Orleans went over that spillway bridge. The road home. But Mama said, I was told yesterday that there's no one's allowed back into the city. Miss Priscilla tore her eyes from the floor. Well, technically that's true unless you have one of these. And she pulled out a badge hanging at the end of a necklace inside her blouse and showed it to us before putting it back where she kept it. With my clearance as a CPS representative, I've been granted a permit to enter the city, of course. They've implemented a curfew, so we're only going to have a few hours, and I sure hope this gives us enough time. And my mind was going a million miles a minute. There's a nice gentleman who'll be riding with me. Poor thing is just as distraught as he can be with worry about his family, since I don't know my way around the city. He's coming along as my guide. But you're coming back, right? Matthew asked, flinging his bangs out from in front of his face, and his breathing was faster than normal. Miss Priscilla placed her hand on the side of his face. Of course I'll be back, boy. Even if Brad Pitt himself asked me to marry him tomorrow and move me to a palace in Rome, Italy, I'd still choose to come back here and be with y'all. And she grabbed a hold of his chin and gave me a squeeze before letting go. Matthew smiled and put his head down, but not before I seen the pink spread into his cheeks, and Mama started to say something, but before she could get her first word out, my own words exploded into the air. I'm going with you. No, Armani. And Celia threw herself into me so hard it knocked the air out of me, and I had to pry the girl's arms from around my middle. Armani, I can't let you. Mama was on her feet. But Mama, I could try to find Daddy and Georgie. My heart was about to pop out of my chest, and so many things were flying into my head all at the same time I couldn't decide what to say first. No, Mama said, firm with her eyes closed. I just got you back. I can't let you go. Please, Mama, please, I can do this. I looked at Miss Priscilla. Will they let me ride with you? Miss Priscilla looked from me to Mama with her lips moving but no words coming out and finally managed to say, well, I'm sure I don't see why I couldn't. See, Mama? But of course it's up to you, honeybee. I don't think I'd let you out of my sight till the day you turn 31 if I was your mama, especially after all that happened. Yeah, but my daddy and brother might be still there. Please, Miss Priscilla, tell Mama we'll be careful and tell her we'll be back. Oh, honey, I can't. It has to be your mama's decision. And I went to Mama and looked at her, knowing that she wasn't going to let me go, and I forgot about anybody else who might have been up in that room with us. And right then, it was just me and Mama, and I wasn't going to let myself cry, but I knew the tears were coming anyway. Mama, please, you have to let me go and at least try to find them. And Mama shook her head and kept closing her eyes. And they'll find us. Can't let you go, she said. Mama, you don't understand. It's because of me that Daddy and Georgie aren't here. Please let me go. And Mama gathered me into her and fought back her own tears. It's not your fault, Armani. It's not your fault. Over and over, she said the same words, and she let me cry into her until I ran out of tears. I didn't want to wipe my nose on my new shirt, so I looked up to ask Miss Priscilla for a tissue, but she wasn't there, and everyone else was gone except for the twins sitting quiet in their bed and Celie standing close by Mama. Everyone went for a walk, Mama said. They'll be back soon. Mama let out a sigh and fell heavy into the rocking chair, and she looked about as tiny as I'd ever seen her, and I stood there feeling worn down and tired and ready to go home to find Georgie and Daddy. There's something I have to tell you, sweetheart, Mama said, looking at me with her eyes as tired as I felt. Uncle Alvin's here. And that's the end of 49.